I remember the exact moment she said it. "You'll get over it." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't even said with anger. That's what made it worse. It was calm, casual, like she was commenting on the weather. We were standing in the kitchen. The evening sun spilled across the counter, catching the tiny dust particles in the air. I had just finished telling her how much it hurt, how invisible I had been feeling, how distant she'd become, how the silence between us was louder than any argument. And she just looked at me, leaned against the fridge, arms folded. "You're overthinking. You'll get over it." That was the moment something inside me cracked. We weren't always like this. 10 years ago, she used to laugh at my stupid jokes. Not polite laughter, real laughter. The kind where she'd grab my arm and lean into me like I was the funniest man alive. Back then, we talked about everything. Dreams, fears, plans, even silly things like what kind of dog we'd adopt one day. We'd stay up late, lying side by side, sharing stories from our childhoods. She used to listen, really listen, and I used to feel seen. But somewhere along the way, things changed. It didn't happen overnight. There was no dramatic moment, no big fight that shattered everything. It was quieter than that. It started with small things. She stopped asking how my day went. Then she stopped noticing when I was tired. Then she stopped noticing me. I told myself it was normal. People get busy. Life happens. Work, responsibilities, routine, it all piles up. I convinced myself this was just what marriage looked like after years together. But deep down, I knew something was off. Because I still noticed her. I noticed when she seemed stressed. When she was quiet. When she looked tired. I still tried. And slowly, I realized, I was the only one trying. The night everything changed didn't begin as anything special. It was just another evening. I came home after a long day at work. The house was quiet except for the TV humming in the living room. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, barely glancing up when I walked in. "Hey," I said. She replied, eyes still on the screen. That, stayed with me longer than it should have. I went to the kitchen, made myself tea, and stood there staring at the wall. Something inside me felt heavy. I didn't want another silent evening. So I walked back into the living room and sat across from her. "We need to talk," I said. She sighed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to let me know this was already an inconvenience. "What now?" she asked. That, "what now," hurt more than anything. Not because of the words, but because of the tone. Like my feelings were a problem she had to deal with. "I feel like I don't matter to you anymore," I said quietly. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she put her phone down, slowly, and looked at me with that familiar expression. The one I'd come to dread. Half patience, half irritation. "Why do you always do this?" she asked. "Do what? Make everything so dramatic." Dramatic. That word echoed in my head. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't accusing. I wasn't even angry. I was just trying to talk. "I'm not being dramatic," I said. "I just want us to." "You're overthinking again," she interrupted. "I'm not overthinking. I'm telling you how I feel. And I'm telling you," she said, leaning back, "you'll get over it." Silence filled the room. Thick, heavy, final. That was the moment something shifted. Not in anger, not in sadness, but in clarity. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in a long time. The woman I had fallen in love with, she was still there, physically. Same face, same voice, but emotionally, she felt like a stranger. And then it hit me. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She just didn't care enough to understand. That realization hurt more than anything she could have said. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. She blinked, slightly surprised. "Okay," she repeated. "Yeah," I said. "You're right." I stood up, walked back into the kitchen. And for the first time in years, I stopped trying to fix us. The next few days were quiet. But it was a different kind of quiet. Before, the silence felt like tension, like something unsaid hanging in the air. Now, it felt empty. I stopped asking her how her day was. I stopped trying to start conversations. I stopped reaching out, not out of spite, but because something inside me had gone still. At first, she didn't notice. Or maybe she did, and just didn't think it mattered. But then small things began to change. I started coming home later. Not because I wanted to avoid her, but because I didn't feel the urgency to rush back anymore. I began spending more time on myself. Reading again. Going for walks. Calling old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. And slowly, I started feeling like myself again. One evening, about 2 weeks later, she finally said something. "Why have you been so distant?" she asked. I almost smiled. Distant. The word felt ironic. "I thought you said I'd get over it," I replied calmly. "I didn't mean," she started. "You did," I said gently. "And you were right." She frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time, I wasn't hoping she'd understand. "It means I stopped expecting anything from you," I said. Her expression changed. Just slightly. But enough for me to notice. "That's not fair," she said. I nodded. "You're right," I said. "It's not." Silence. "But neither is feeling alone in your own marriage," I added. She didn't respond. And that's when I realized something important. This wasn't a fight anymore. It wasn't even a conversation. It was a turning point. "I'm tired," I said quietly. "Of what?" "Of trying to be heard by someone who isn't listening." Her eyes softened, but only for a moment. Then the walls came back up. "So what are you saying?" she asked. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I had been unknowingly preparing for. "I'm saying," I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I deserve to feel valued." She crossed her arms. "You are valued." I shook my head gently. "No," I said. "I'm tolerated." That landed. I could see it. "I don't yell," I continued. "I don't complain. I don't make things difficult. And somewhere along the way, that turned me into background noise in your life." She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. "I've been asking for connection," I said. "Not perfection. Just effort. And now?" she asked quietly. I looked at her. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the answer. "Now," I said, "I've stopped asking." The room felt different. Like the air itself had shifted. "You're giving up?" she asked. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I'm choosing myself." That hit harder than anything else I'd said. Because it wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was final. "You can't just walk away from a marriage like that," she said, her voice tightening. I didn't, I replied. I stayed. I tried. I spoke. I waited. I took a step back. "You just didn't hear me." Silence. Real silence this time. Not avoidance. Not indifference. But something heavier. Regret. "I didn't realize it was this bad," she said softly. I believed her. That was the tragic part. "You didn't realize," I said, "because you didn't want to." Tears filled her eyes. But something inside me remained steady. "I thought you'd always be there," she whispered. I nodded. "I was," I said. A pause. "But I needed you to be there too." She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time in years. And maybe she was. But for me, it felt too late. Not because I stopped loving her. But because I had finally started respecting myself. And sometimes, those two things don't survive together. "I don't know what to do," she said. I sighed softly. "For the first time," I said, "that's not my responsibility to figure out." That was my final answer. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just clear. And this time, she didn't say I'd get over it. Because deep down, she knew, I already had.